It's January 8th, 2026. Welcome to YesToHellWith.com. This is a summation of this video. The subscriber's letter that was sent to the IRS failed because it answered too quickly, assumed authority instead of forcing proof, and turned a potentially clean procedural record into noise, errors of order, not belief. The Liberty Dialogues teach that, like navigating the Amazon jungle, survival in the federal system depends on recognition of hidden dangers first, because questions preserve control while declarations feed presumption. If you read the report about the employment taxes yesterday, you likely have a greater appreciation for why these videos and content are currently structured as they are. We have been examining the content of the letter I just mentioned, and from the beginning, I asked you not to look for a solution, not to draft a response, not to ask what form should be filed. Instead, I asked, within the context of the Liberty Dialogues, to study where the letter failed to serve the best interests of that person. Specifically, I asked 5 things: where the letter helped the IRS by answering too quickly, where the letter assumed authority instead of challenging authority, where the letter turned what should have been a clean record into noise, which Liberty Dialogues principles were violated, and finally, what proper order would look like without drafting any response. That exercise was not academic. It is not philosophical either. It is survival. Let's start with the first failure, answering too quickly. The IRS letter asked why a return was not filed. That question already presumes liability. Under the Liberty Dialogues, the first discipline is never to answer a presumed question before the presumption itself is exposed. By responding substantively, by explaining, declaring, and justifying, the writer cured the IRS's defect. This is not good. He accepted the frame before forcing the IRS to establish why the frame applied at all. In Liberty Dialogues terms, the presumption moved first, and the response sent by the subscriber validated the presumption. That single mistake alone allows the system to proceed exactly as it is designed. Secondly, the letter assumed authority instead of challenging authority. Statements such as, "You have no jurisdiction over me," and "I owe you nothing," they sound strong, but procedurally they concede the very thing they attempt to deny. Authority must be proven before it can be rebutted. Denial without a demand for proof accepts the IRS premise that authority already exists. The letter never required the IRS to identify the statute, jurisdiction, or nexus that created the alleged obligation. Rather, it argued against authority as though authority were already lawfully in place. That is a fatal sequencing error under the Liberty Dialogues. Third, the letter turned what should have been a clean record into nothing but noise. Accusations of fraud, coercion, RICO violations, treason, and tyranny may feel morally satisfying, but they have no procedural remedy attached. Administrative systems do not respond to outrage. They respond to process. From a Liberty Dialogues perspective, emotional language converts a potentially controlled record into clutter. Once the record becomes noise, it no longer constrains the agency. It justifies dismissal, escalation, or non-response. Fourth, the letter violated core Liberty Dialogues principles. It violated order by arguing status before forcing jurisdictional proof. It violated discipline by making declarations instead of asking questions. It violated restraint by denying labels rather than exposing how those labels were applied. It violated record control by substituting accusation for precision. These are not mistakes of belief, they are mistakes of sequence. And now this is where the Amazon jungle analogy matters, because this is exactly how people die in jungles. Imagine being dropped alone, as we discussed, into the Amazon with no guide, no rescue, And the jungle does not care what you believe. It does not respond to sincerity or courage. It responds only to reality. Presumption is the crocodile beneath the surface. You never see it until it pulls you under. Authority is the venomous snake that strikes before you are aware of it. Status is the hidden pit covered with leaves, waiting for someone who steps forward confidently, but out of ignorance. Standing is the current that carries you away downstream while you think you are swimming safely. The subscriber did not lose because he was wrong about injustice. He lost because he stepped into predators he did not yet know how to see. That is why the Liberty Dialogues do not begin with solutions. They begin with diagnosis. You do not hand someone a machete before explaining the danger of snakes. You do not give directions before explaining the treacherousness of rivers. And you do not offer procedural instruments before teaching how presumption, authority, status, and standing operate. This is also why the person who asks the questions maintains control. Statements invite rebuttal. Declarations invite dismissal. Accusations invite escalation. But properly framed questions asked in the correct order force explanation. And explanation is the enemy of presumption. That is the lesson of the letter. Not that the writer lacked courage, not that the writer lacked conviction, but that the writer moved before understanding the terrain. That is why I asked you to study failure instead of rushing towards solutions, because in systems like this, failure is not random. It is patterned. Once you can see the pattern, you stop feeding the system the very things it needs to move against you. That is the purpose of this exercise. That is the role of the Liberty Dialogues. And that is why the Amazon jungle analogy is not dramatic, it is precise. Because the federal government is more dangerous than a jungle, and most people walk into it confidently without realizing that they are already surrounded by danger. And as always, may truth reign supreme.